Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone to Muslim Skeptic Live number 14. This is your brother Daniel Haqiqatjou. I'm here with what I hope will be an exciting and engaging discussion, an episode on what I call Convince Me Otherwise. Basically, if you have a disagreement with me, something I've said or written has offended you, or you disagree, then please feel free to comment, make a note, and I'll respond to that, inshallah. Also, hopefully, we'll be able to hear some people call in and actually have a discussion. So that this is something new that I'm just experimenting and trying out and seeing how it works. So if there's any technical problems, please forgive me. This is the first time I'm doing it. So whenever there's something new that I try out, there's usually a learning curve associated with it. Okay, so we can now begin. I'm going to prioritize some of the comments that have already been made when I announced this yesterday. So some of the comments I've reached out and asked if the commenter wants to actually come on the live broadcast and have a one-on-one discussion. We'll see if anyone comes on. Hopefully at least one or two people will. But before we do that, we can just warm up a little bit. We can warm up with some of the comments that have been made on Facebook. So just give me a second for me to pull it up. I don't know why this is. Okay. Yeah, a lot of the comments and complaints I've heard many times before, sometimes from the same people, and I've addressed many of the concerns that people have over the years. I try to really do that within my Facebook page and other social media. I don't like an echo chamber. I don't like to, block or delete or hide comments that I feel are substantive, that are actually critical, make good points, or things that I feel should be addressed. I don't like to block that or delete that, which some people do. So if you go to the pages of certain personalities, figures, they will actively delete comments, they'll block or hide comments. I try not to do that. People will criticize me, people will say, sometimes mean things about me, but I think that sometimes it can be constructive, and it's not really healthy to have an echo chamber when there is a learning opportunity. I do block some people because they are coming from troll accounts, basically, where it's an anonymous person without any friends or any kind of contact, and then the person will spam all of my posts with just comment after comment saying the same thing over and over and over again. So people like that, it becomes a nuisance, it drags down the page, so I will block things like that. But people who will just put in, critical comments, I don't block that. I think it's better to engage, because usually if the person is saying something wrong, then it's very easy to point out that they're wrong. If they're saying something right and they made a good point, then okay, that's something that has to be taken into consideration, and maybe I'll change my view, maybe I'll update what I think about the matter. So it's always a learning experience. Okay, so yesterday I posted about doing this show, and there were some comments that I thought would be interesting to address. So one of the comments here, here's an example of a troll comment. This person named Jane Grover, not clear who it is, and Jane will sometimes comment on my posts. Seems like she's a non-Muslim. She'll just, say something stupid about Islam, And this is someone that it's easy to respond to. You don't need to be intimidated by someone who talks like this. So she says, Daniel, you say Islam calls for various people to be murdered. What are your chosen methods for murdering people? Also, you say that Islam is intolerant of other beliefs. In an Islamic state, what methods would you use to force people into Islam? And so this is like a troll comment. Maybe she thinks that this is going to throw someone off to ask something stupid like this. So the first thing that she says, Islam calls for various people to be murdered. Okay, yeah, so murder, what does murder mean? It means to kill unjustly. Okay, so when someone is on death row in the US or in other countries that have capital punishment, they've committed a crime. They have done something like kill another person. They have maybe committed treason against the state, some other kind of capital offense, and now they're on death row and they're set to be executed. Maybe they're a serial killer. So the state is not murdering those people. The state has tried them, convicted them, and they're now on death row awaiting capital punishment through the electric chair, through lethal injection, and so forth. This is not the state murdering. The state has convicted someone, and this is the punishment that they receive, and the punishment will fit the crime. And so how do we decide what is criminal? How do we decide right and wrong? How do we decide what is a capital offense that is worthy of death? That's something that we refer to God, okay? Allah, the creator, the one who has created us, decides what is right and wrong, okay? And what deserves punishment, what deserves what kind of punishment, what is the actual process for convicting someone, what is the process for bringing evidence in order to convict or acquit a person, that the qadi, this is the judge, the Islamic judge, will decide. So this is, there are many different systems and models. And what are these systems and models in different cultures and countries based on? The different laws, the different penal codes, what is it based on? Well, in all these countries, in the secular world, it's based on a secular ideology. And what is secular ideology based on? It is based on the thought processes, the philosophical musings of a certain group of thinkers within a particular point in history, expressing their kind of biases and their cultural views on what is right and wrong. And they're open about that. They say that, okay, this is our system based on liberal secularism or so forth. So the difference is that in Islam, our penal code, our justice system, our understanding of what is right and wrong is based on what the Creator has told us and guided humanity with. Okay, this is guidance from the Creator. And so, yes, there are certain crimes that are so heinous and so destructive that they deserve capital punishment. So this is, the way that I would answer this kind of comment. And so specifically it's saying, what are your chosen methods? So the Sharia, it's not that we choose. Allah has commanded certain methods for execution. Stoning is one of them. That's the one that people are more aware of. And there's other methods as well that the Sharia dictates when it comes to capital punishment, or in certain cases qisas, retribution, so on and so forth. It's an extended discussion, but if Jane Grover would like more information, we'd be very happy to answer these kinds of questions. And then as far as the Islamic State, what methods would you use to force people into Islam? Force is a big topic, right? Force and coercion is a big topic. But force and coercion is something that every society, every government, every country uses force, okay? If you look at the United States or any secular country, you have laws, don't you? Laws that are enforced by a penal code, by an executive branch, by a police state, by a surveillance state, okay? There is no country in history that has policed and coerced people's actions more than the modern United States, than the modern, different European countries. If you look at the penal code and you look at how many laws are on the books in these countries, you can fill libraries with the legal code. And it's so expansive that a person would have to spend their entire lives just to specialize and become an expert in one discipline. That's how many laws are on the books. Well, what are laws? Laws are about coercion. Laws are about forcing people to abide and act in a very specific and certain way. So, for example, if I'm living in a community, if I, for example, paint my house, or I paint my condo, or I paint my townhouse, or wherever I'm living, my apartment, a certain color, that's against the code of the municipality or of the county. And then the sheriff can come and say, well, you can't paint your house this color, change it. And if you don't change it, then you can have a lien put on your house, which means that the state can actually confiscate your home and force you to move out. This is all force. This is all coercion. Okay? Something as simple as what color I want my house to be. No, you have to have it very specific. You can't color it. You can't paint your house purple or, fuchsia or whatever. So this is coercion, right? And the number of laws that are in secular countries that are coercing people to act in certain ways is far greater than what you would find in Islamic law, in the Sharia. So if surely someone will concede that not all laws are bad, not all laws are something problematic. No, there are great laws, there are good laws that we are happy about because they preserve life or they are in line with morality and so on and so forth. And so when you have those good laws, then how are they enforced? They're enforced by police. That's coercion. That is force. So this idea that coercion is something that's bad, it's not substantiated if you actually look at what coercion is and how it exists in all of these societies. Now the question is, you're using force and coercion based on what? Right? What is the morality that justifies the coercion that you use, that the police will implement and operationalize? Is it based on truth? Is it based on justice? Or is it based on, again, the philosophical musings of different 17th and 18th century British and French philosophers who thought that, I think morality is about this. This is what I think. And then they disagree with each other, and then there's a cultural consensus that's formed because of that particular philosophy. Yeah, if you want your entire life and you want the society in which you live to be dictated by the musings of these particular white men, fine, okay? But for myself and for Muslims, we recognize the rationality of following the guidance of the lawgiver, the creator, the one who has created us. Again, it goes back to this very basic point. So does the Islamic State force people to convert? That's an extended discussion. The answer is Ahlul Kitab, people of the book. No, there is no coercion. They can maintain their religion and practice. Are there certain restrictions on how they can practice their religion? Yes, of course. I've discussed this many times, explained it and rationalized it. So if you're interested in that, just check out MuslimSkeptic.com and you can see those kinds of arguments. But again, it's not something that Muslims should be shy about in explaining that, yes, the Islamic State, in the sense of a true a society that truly embodies the values of Islam, and a governance that truly embodies the values of Islam, does encourage, through the system, through the Islamic system, through the laws and the politics of that system, does pull people push them towards becoming Muslim, because there's different incentives towards that. There are different incentives towards that. For example, the fact that it's the religion of the society. Okay? And there's always going to be that kind of pressure. When you're in a Muslim majority society, then people within that society are going to be encouraged to join the majority. And we see the exact opposite of that in non-Muslim countries. Look at the West. Look at the number of non-Muslims, unfortunately, that leave Islam. And most of their justification is that they feel pressure. It's hard to be the odd man out, right? And so you want to imitate. There's this drive to imitate the majority of society. There's peer pressure and there's so forth that will push people towards adopting things that are contrary to Islam. And so this is found in every society. It's not just Islamic society. Every society has this kind of force, has this kind of coercion, has this kind of influence. Okay, look at within the West in general. There are certain things that you can't express. There are certain things that you can't say that are considered to be violations. Look at even online how increasingly there's community violations. You can't say and speak in certain ways that contradicts the liberal mandate, the liberal guidelines that have been set by the Silicon Valley billionaires based on their own musings and their own philosophy on what is right and wrong. And then they dictate that, they enforce that. And so there's nothing wrong with the coercive aspect of it. The question is, well, what are those guidelines and those laws based on? That's the question. When it comes to the secular world, it's based on the fallible, mistaken, contradictory, confusing, damaging, destructive thought process of finite men, specific men. In Islam, it's based on what the Creator has sent of guidance through the Quran and the Sunnah and the example of the Sahaba and so forth. Okay, so that's that question. So now let's go to a call. Assalamu alaikum. One second. Can you turn off your mic or turn off the video?
Yeah, I guess.
So it's not a loop.
I just want to say I respect you on so many levels. When it comes to the concept of and all these other writings you have done, I think you did a phenomenal job. But there's this one comment that you wrote specifically. I just think that I might be wrong. But from what I can see, that you don't have so this one comment that I commented on. Let me pull it up right now.
What's your name, by the way? What's your name?
Oh, my name is Hafiz.
Hafiz. All right. And where are you calling from?
I'm actually I live in New York City.
Okay, brother. So please tell me how I disagree with you based on the comment that you submitted. Or how you disagree with me.
Okay, when I say let's see, Muslim Skeptic Live today, you said you would talk about, anything like abortion. So I didn't know anything about you're against abortion, right?
Well, just stick to your comment. What comment did you make? I can read it if you would like, and then let's stick to that. Or if you want to talk about abortion, I mean, you have to have something specific to say.
Okay, so I said, although I agree with you on many points, I don't think that you're qualified to talk about Islam on a scholarly perspective. I think that you're trying to emulate that. That's just me. Prove me wrong. What I meant by that was that like how you write things. Like there's a certain type of like how someone write their like how someone's trying to convey messages and stuff, right? I think
All right,
when
well,
I
let's
wrote
talk
that,
about
I
the
think
scholarly perspective. So, what do you mean, scholarly perspective? I don't claim to be a scholar. I've never claimed to be a scholar. I'm a student of knowledge. But in no shape or form do I say that I'm a sheikh or a scholar of Islam in the sense of an alim, because I'm not. But does that mean I can't say anything about Islam? Or I cannot
absolutely
talk
not.
about Islam at all? Is that what you mean?
No, no, no. Oh, okay. I finally understand. Yes, thank you. So what happened? Yeah, I think that's what it came off as. I mean, the way I perceived you as you someone who you thought yourself as someone who's this big sheikh like Mufti
No.
Mankin and
No, absolutely
others.
not. Absolutely not.
Oh,
Okay, well, great.
oh,
Thank you for your comment. Anything else?
I'm sorry if I offended you in any way. I'm
No, no,
sorry.
absolutely not. No offense taken at all. These are valid questions, and glad that I could address that. I think it's something that people mistake is thinking that I'm out here saying that I'm a mufti or I'm a sheikh. Not at all. I've never claimed this because I'm not. A scholar in that sense, an alim. If you mean scholar in the secular sense, as someone who has gone through a secular education and has a degree, okay, because in the English language they use the term scholar and being scholarly, so we have to make a distinction. Do we mean Islamic scholar? Well, the Arabic term is alim, someone who is min al ulama, from the ulama, those who are of knowledge and have ilm. So no, I'm not an alim by any means, but that doesn't mean that I can't comment on Islam, and I limit myself to only those things that are well known and known in the religion. So, for example, if I say that same-sex behavior is wrong and is sinful, then this is something that any Muslim can say, should say. This is part of Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi anil Munkar, commanding the good and preventing or forbidding the evil, the munkar, the wrong. Many aspects of Islam, as Muslims, you don't have to be an alim to be able to speak the truth. Okay? Make sure that you know what is true, first of all. Okay? Don't just speak as an ignorant person. You have to study and know the basics that every Muslim is required to know, right? The basics that Muslims are required to know. Are you supposed to know as a Muslim that alcohol is prohibited? Yes, you are obligated to know this. Because if you don't know this, you will violate the Sharia by drinking alcohol or encouraging others to drink alcohol or sell alcohol and so forth. You have to know haram and halal, right? So can you convey that? Can you speak about that? Can you encourage others to abide by halal and haram? Of course, everyone. You don't have to be an alim for that. And so the things that I talk about are on that level, purely on the level of encouragement and amr bil ma'ruf wa nahi anil munkar for the community. And you do not have to be an alim in order to do that. Okay. Let's see if there's anyone else who is waiting to call in. I think someone sent me a message. Hold on. Let's see. Hold on. I hope people aren't getting cold feet. Just feel free to call in, message me on Facebook if I gave you a note, and then we can talk. Okay, hold on. Let's see. Assalamualaikum.
Hello.
Assalamualaikum.
How are you?
Good, alhamdulillah. Can you just tell us your name?
My name is Abraham.
Okay, Abraham. Thank you for calling in. Jazakallah khair. So just please explain to me, your point of view, your comment, and what you think.
Yeah, sure. So I sent you a comment on Facebook with a thread linked to something that Dahlia Mugahid said on Facebook. And she says, this is a retraction and apology. Several weeks ago, I accused Haqiqatjou of expressing support for white supremacists in a comment on my Facebook. I based this on a screenshot sent to me of his post. She then has several other tweets basically explaining that she got this wrong and that it was inaccurate, and that she asked God's forgiveness and she has deleted the tweet and so forth. I was wondering why you didn't post this on your Facebook page, as I think it's important to acknowledge when, for example, the other side admits that they've gone something wrong or that they're expressing a retraction, for you to kind of acknowledge and encourage that.
Okay, so she, from what I understand, she issued a retraction on what exactly?
On her accusation that you support white supremacists. That was one of the things that she said in her original reply, if you recall, and to which you responded to in your response to her response. So she is now saying that she admits that it was inaccurate of her and wrong for her to say that you support white supremacists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is, just for context, I had published an article on MuslimSkeptic.com that detailed Sister Dahlia Mugahid's encouragement and promotion, endorsement of Muslim Girl, MuslimGirl.com. And MuslimGirl.com is a very vile website that promotes all kinds of fahisha, LGBT, perennialism, and so forth. And so I criticized Dahlia Mugahid for her endorsement of Muslim Girl, which is liable to cause all kinds of confusion and loss of faith amongst young Muslims. And so she responded to my article by making all kinds of claims against me, insulting me, saying that I only published this for seeking attention, I support white supremacy, that I'm a fasiq, basically, that all these kinds of ugly things to accuse someone of. And I responded to that. And then now apparently she has apologized for saying that I support white supremacy. And the thing is that she's blocked me on Twitter. So I can't actually go and see those tweets. I can just see what people send me. So if she hadn't blocked me, I would have been happy to retweet that and to share that, but I'm blocked on Twitter. So, I mean, and also calling me a supporter of white supremacy is not the worst thing that she actually said. So, that's fine. Like, I don't want to make, the other thing is I don't want to make this about me versus Dahlia Mugahid. It's not about that at all. This is not personal. I don't have any personal animosity towards the sister. This is between Dahlia Mugahid and the community. right? Because she is making these public statements in support of a very destructive group, an organization. And so the Muslim community needs to ask Dahlia Mugahed, why are you doing this? Why do you feel justified in supporting them and promoting them? Please answer our questions. If we view you as a community leader, you need to be accountable to us and to answer to us when we have these kinds of questions. So this is not between me and Sister Dahlia. I don't really take, demand apologies or anything like that. It's not about me and her. This is a bigger issue than that.
Right, and I can appreciate where you're coming from on those issues. However, what I would say is that, given her, let's say, professional position, right, you recognize that she can't necessarily, for example, just come out and publicly disavow everything that's going on the left, right? Because for her, that would mean the end of her career. So, I mean, it doesn't, how exactly do you factor that in when asking these kinds of questions? How do you give her a kind of out?
Well, I would say that there's two different things here, right? If we want a complete disassociation from the left, that's a much bigger conversation. That wasn't what was demanded in the article. In the post I had, all I had asked her is, how do you justify promotion of a very specific website and promotion of very specific kinds of policies that the ISPU, her organization that she's the director of, puts out? And so that's a very specific question. Is it possible to be, on good terms with the Democratic Party and not promote Muslim Girl? I think so. I don't think it's the end of her career to be able to say something as simple as, I made a mistake by associating with Muslim Girl. I disavow the things that they are promoting, and leave it at that. I mean, it's a very simple retraction to make. And then, I mean, there's still the deeper question of what her organization, the ISPU, is actually promoting. And then again, you can say, well, do you have to be, on the front lines or pushing on the front lines of the Muslim community trans bathroom bills, right? And this kind of legislation that would force masajid, for example, in Islamic schools to have trans-friendly policies. How can you justify that? For her to say that, if she were going to say something like, well, if I come out against this, then I'm going to lose my contacts with the left, I'm going to lose my influence within the left wing. Okay, well then maybe that's the cost that it'll take to stand by your religion, to stand by Islamic principles, to stand and if you want to be a representative of the Muslim community, you need to stand by Islamic principles and prioritize Islamic principles instead of siding with your personal career ambitions and a non-Muslim political party. I mean, what kind of thought process is that? I'm going to lose my career, or I'm going, if we assume that is the case, I'm going to be, nothing if this happens. Well, okay, then maybe that's the cost for being a Muslim and standing by your deen and being a leader of the Muslim community. Why should we as a community support and endorse and stand behind leaders who don't prioritize Islam, who don't prioritize Islamic principles? How's that making sense?
So I sympathize with where you're coming from, especially given the general trend of where the community is going. However, what I would say is that the attitude that you're espousing essentially means that we can't have any Muslims working within any of these organizations. I mean, we don't really know what's going on.
Which organizations?
On the inside. So we don't really know what's going on in the inside of the nitty gritty of, let's just say, the ISPU. We don't know what's going on inside whatever, organizations that some of these Muslims are a part of. How do we know that maybe they're not actually doing good for the Muslim community from within that position where, yes, they kind of have to compromise, right, at least outwardly, in terms of towing the line. But from within the organization, they're actually working to help Muslims and to like mitigate the worst effects that they're kind of having.
I mean, where's
it perfectly.
Right. So where's the evidence for this, right? We're not going to be able to judge something based on something that is secret that people don't know. I'm sure if they were claiming that, look, we have to sacrifice and compromise on LGBT, otherwise, or feminism, or perennialism, otherwise, the Muslim community is going to be destroyed and we're going to all be thrown into concentration camps. Okay, if that is the case, justify it, prove it, show that that is actually what's happening, or that is actually the threat. No, what we do see from these organizations are vague fear-mongering that, trust us, what we're doing, we have to make these sacrifices, otherwise, the whole community is going to be destroyed. In the last Muslim Skeptic Live, I talked about this in detail and how Allah mentions this in the Quran and how He says that the agents of shaitan use these kinds of fear tactics to the believers and say, look, the people are gathering against you, the people are coming to destroy you, and on that basis people sacrifice and say, okay, we are going to be in mortal danger, so we have to compromise our principles, compromise on Islam. But Allah in the Quran says that this is actually not what the believers do. In fact, the believers increase in their faith. They increase in their faith and their connection to deen. So this kind of fear-mongering, if there is evidence, show me. Like, okay, Donald Trump has issued a declaration that if Muslims do not accept LGBT, we're going to be thrown into concentration camps. And as a community, we have to come out and start wearing rainbow hijabs, rainbow flags, and maybe even some of us have to engage in same-sex behavior. Otherwise, you're going to be killed. If that's the reality, I mean, that's the way that you're describing it. Like, they have to make these sacrifices. They're forced to. Then, okay, then we can have that conversation. But absent of that, we have to judge based on what is visible. And what is visible is that people are losing their faith. The Muslim community, so many young Muslims, millennials, and older, my age or older, are also becoming very confused about what is right and wrong in Islam. You have polls, which I don't know how accurate they are, but they claim that over 50% of American Muslims think that there's nothing morally wrong with same-sex behavior, right? And they support same-sex marriage. So this is a big jump from 10 years ago. Like, it's doubled within 10 years. Why is that the case? Like, assuming that that's accurate, Allahu Alam, I don't know, and there's reasons to take these kinds of stats with a grain of salt, but assuming that it's true, like anecdotally I see it, that a lot of youth are confused on this issue. Well, why has that happened? And what is the gravity of this kind of viewpoint? In fact, it's kufr. Like, you're going contrary to what Allah has said in the Quran, what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said. This is a major aspect of Islam that you're throwing under the bus, and a lot of these kids don't even realize it. They've just come to accept it because they see someone like Dahlia Mujahid promoting Muslim Girl and her organization ISPU promoting policies that Islamophobia goes hand in hand with homophobia and transphobia, meaning that if Muslims want to not die and not be thrown in concentration camps, then we had better support trans and same-sex marriage and LGBT and so on and so forth. So I don't find this argument very convincing at all. So one last point.
If you would allow me to convince you, and I would hope, I think we're having a good back and forth. So I would hope that if you could just hang on to the line as opposed to just kind of having a kind of set framework of, okay, each phone call is only going to be 2 minutes, and so we're going to just skip. I think.
No, go ahead. Feel free. Go ahead.
So yeah. So as far as the general view, right? I get what you're saying, that we have to judge based on the lawahir, and this is what's happening. However, what I would say is that I do think, in a certain sense, your analysis leaves out the fact that by the time let's just say, for example, the U.S. establishment decided, yes, you know what, we're going to crush the Muslims, and that the fear mongering of these people is correct, right? By the time they move on us, it's going to be too late to pretend like, oh, we're progressive or whatever. You get what I'm trying to say? At that point, it's just going to be like one fell swoop, and boom. You know, it's like, so from now, we find Muslims that are kind of already leaning towards that okay, let's compromise, let's whatever, let's support this, let's support that, taking kind of the point of view that Jonathan Brown espoused in that article that was on Yaqeen Institute. I'm sure you've read, where it was Jonathan Brown's view versus Dr. Shadi al-Masri. Now I'll be honest, I tend to go with the view that Dr. Shadi al-Masri espoused in that article, which is kind of what you're saying now, which is a much more kind of stick with Islam, and even if we are persecuted for our beliefs, this is the way of the Prophet and so forth. But I'm just saying we have to be realistic, and what I'm saying is, realistically, if the general impression of the U.S. public was that Muslims are like Daniel Haqiqatjou, all right, they would not like us very much. They would very much be in favor of persecuting us in one fell swoop.
I think that's a big assumption. That's a big assumption.
I don't think it is. I really don't. I think, what do you call the vast majority, right? We have to be realistic. The vast majority of Americans think that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, well, na'udhu billah, but they think he's a barbarian, right? They think he's,
so that's based on miseducation. So an organization like ISPU and others are supposed to educate the wider community about what Islam means. And the reaction that I've had from non-Muslims who will interact with me and will speak with me, I've had many non-Muslims come to me and say, wow, Daniel, this is amazing that Islam has these kinds of provisions, and this is what Islam is about. I was ignorant about it, and now I can understand that you guys have a point on all of these things. And I wish that the West would realize how much we're losing and how much modernity is destroying us, and how the traditional values espoused by Islam are actually beneficial. So I think that's the perspective that you would find. I think the ignorance, what we see in terms of animosity towards Islam, is mostly based on ignorance and not knowing what Islam is about, and a malicious distortion of who Muslims are and what Islam is about.
I will 100% agree with you that if you present Islam in a more authentic fashion, there will be more people who are attracted to Islam. That's a given.
Well, that's what I'm asking for these organizations that they just present.
Hang on, right? So what I'm saying though is I don't feel like you're taking the other side into consideration, which is that the more authentically you present Islam, the more there are going to be people who absolutely hate it and will oppose it, right? Yeah. Like when the Prophet came, there was Abu Sufyan, right? He was there. The Quraysh opposed.
So do you think? Here's a question for you. Do you think?
It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a game, right?
Do you think that?
Is that if we present Islam like that, there are going to be people who come after us, and guess what? The people who are in power, like right now, are like Abu Sufyan / 100 times worse.
So this is exactly what the people who are really against us, they don't even believe the things that organizations like ISPU and others, they don't even believe what they put out. Those people who are really against Islam, the ones who are analogous to Abu Sufyan or Abu Jahl or Abu Lahab, they think that those groups are practicing taqiyya. And in a sense, they are practicing taqiyya, because they're hiding the truth about what is Islam.
I didn't want to use the word, but that's what I was.
That's taqiyya. So these organizations are practicing that. So, and that sounds exactly like what you're advocating, right? You're saying that they're justified.
I'm not necessarily advocating. What I'm saying is this: that I don't feel like you are discussing the issue in its in the completeness it deserves. You're just kind of dismissing this idea that, listen, if we come out and just say this is Islam and we stick to our principles, that these people won't try to come after us. And I'm saying they.
I don't say that. I don't say that.
Sorry.
I don't say that they won't come after us if we stick to our principles.
Why are you dismissing this idea that these people will try to put us in concentration camps and so forth?
No, what I'm saying is that they would do this regardless, right? They would oppose Muslims regardless. They are opposing Muslims regardless. If they want to put Muslims in concentration camps, me putting on a rainbow flag or a rainbow pin and saying I love LGBT, that's not going to save. That's not going to save me, right? It's not going to save the community, because the people who are trying, hold on a second. So the people who are trying to attack Muslims, right? They are deliberately going to force us to water down our principles. I mean, this is exactly the game. It's a slippery slope. So as soon as you accept LGBT or accept same-sex marriage, then the bar is going to change, and they'll say, okay, well, what about trans? Are you going to accept trans? Then the community has to accept that. And then they'll say, well, what about females leading prayer, females leading salah? We need women imams. And then the community has to accept that. And then they're going to say, okay, well, you also need to have same-sex attracted or homosexual imams practicing gay imams. And then the community has to accept that. And then they'll say, well, you're not really tolerant, because why aren't you allowing your mosques to be led by trans imams? And then the community has to accept that. And then they'll say, well, why aren't you allowing non-Muslims to come preach Christianity and Judaism? Because look, all religions are good. All religions are the same. That's one of the bedrock principles of secular society. So you have to accept that. And so the community has to continuously be held hostage to the demands of secular society in order to be accepted and not be considered extremist, not be considered barbaric, not be considered a security threat, right? This is the game. This is not something that is new. They've been doing this for over 200 years. This is what the colonizers did, is that you continuously move the bar so that you can portray the Muslim community that you're trying to dominate as intolerant, backwards, and in need of reform. And this is how you control the community. The worst thing that we can do is play into that game and start sacrificing, because it's not going to end. There's not going to be any end to that kind of game. And we see that. And that's why the community in certain parts is becoming more and more liberal, and is forced to accept more and more and more. So this is a kind of Faustian bargain that just doesn't make any sense to me, and it hasn't made sense, and no one has been able to explain it properly. So, I mean, we have to go to other comments and questions.
Okay, if that's the case, I will let you go. However, I would say that, listen, the reasoning that you kind of explained there, I tend to agree with and lean towards. However, my point was merely that these people are not simply fear-mongering. That you have to accept the consequences of what you're advocating is likely going to lead to very negative consequences for the Muslim community, and we need to be honest about this.
How? On what basis do you have that knowledge? Can you justify that? You said that I don't have evidence for my position. So please provide evidence for what you're saying.
I didn't say you didn't have. I didn't say you didn't have evidence for your position. I just said I agree with your position. Right, but what I'm saying.
So what is the evidence for your position?
The position is that if we keep sacrificing, the bar is going to keep moving, and we have to bow to the idols of the mushrikeen, essentially. And there's always going to be a new idol that we have to bow before. So I get that, right, and I understand where you're coming from. But what I'm simply saying is, I believe that if we were to take a serious stand and to say, no, we don't believe these things, we will not bow to your idols, they will come after us with pitchforks, and it's going to be ugly.
They're already coming out for us. Wasn't that the entire premise? Wasn't that the entire premise of what you're saying? That these organizations are doing what they're doing because there's this animosity and people are coming out and attacking the Muslim community? Isn't that the whole premise of their behavior?
What I'm saying is we haven't seen nothing yet.
We have. Are you old enough to remember 9/11 and what the community went through in 9/11? They were putting people, they're detaining people, they were forcibly detaining them, forcing them out of the country. There was a huge crackdown after 9/11 on the Muslim community. There were entire organizations that were shut down, that were prosecuted as providing material support to terrorism. Yeah, you had a huge reaction to that. So things like this exist. And we don't have to look at the American context. You can look at the history of colonialism. You can look at the history of colonialism and see the kinds of crackdowns that have happened. You can look at the history that is mentioned in the Quran and how the kuffar have attacked the believers simply on the basis that they say, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. Or that they follow the Anbiya. This is something that we understand from the Quran, right?
What you're suggesting, that we shouldn't dismiss what those other people are saying, that this is going to lead to very, very bad things for the Muslims. In terms of their dunya, it's going to lead to extreme hardship. You seem to be agreeing with me.
Muslims are already experiencing extreme hardship, brother. I don't know what in the world today, what is happening in China, right? What is happening in Muslim countries around the world. Look at what is happening in Saudi Arabia. Look at what is happening in Egypt. Muslims are suffering. Look at what happened in Yemen. What's happening in Syria. I don't know what world you're living in, but Muslims are being attacked with the full force of the Western powers. Western powers are criminalizing Sharia. Ilhan Omar, I mean, this was the news of last week, that she introduced legislation into Congress to put sanctions on Brunei for its implementation of Sharia. So nowhere in the world are Muslims allowed, by this logic, to live by the Sharia, because the US will put sanctions and will create... Sanctions are extremely violent, right? Because you're causing a deprivation in resources. It's a hit to the economy, which causes hunger, loss of life, death, starvation, so on and so forth. So Muslims are already being attacked from every single angle. And this kind of logic to think that, oh, if only we accepted same-sex marriage, we would be safe and we would be protected from this kind of harm. This is very delusional, I'm sorry to say, brother. And it's delusional for these organizations. And the fact of the matter is that when you have organizations, Muslim organizations, that start towing the liberal line and they start compromising and conceding on all of these points, one after the other, are they really helping the Muslim community? No, they're not helping the Muslim community. Is Ilhan Omar helping the Muslim community? She just introduced legislation to sanction a Muslim country, attacking Muslims. Okay, is Ilhan Omar going to defend Muslims that believe that that only men can be imams? Is she going to support that? Or is the entire community going to have to accept that, no, it's possible for an imam of the masjid to be a woman and for men to pray behind her? Is that what's next for the Muslim community? If you think that it's acceptable to make these compromises in deen, otherwise bad things will happen, we'll justify that. Bad things are already happening day after day after day, and these organizations are only, frankly, looking out for themselves, right? They're the ones who are benefiting and profiting from these kinds of government relations that they have, or from different non-Muslim civil rights groups that fund them and grant them the kind of political access that they have, the kind of media access that they have. They're benefiting from that by being I'm the rainbow hijab wearing Muslim who thinks that transgender people should be able to go into whatever bathroom that they want. They benefit from that. The rest of the Muslim community, the vast majority of Muslims who recognize that and stick by the fact that that is wrong and that Islam does not accept that, we're thrown under the bus. Okay? We're going to be thrown under the bus. We are being thrown under the bus. So that's how I'd answer that. Let's see. Now let's go to YouTube and let's see what YouTube commenters are saying. So Zaid says, would you agree, brother, that the Sharia is nuanced and punishment for homosexuals is actually for the act of penetration witnessed by 4 people? Yes, of course I'd agree with that, because that's what the Sharia says. Homosexuality is not what is criminalized by the Sharia in a certain sense, because it's just the action. If you commit that kind of behavior of penetration, the same-sex act, then that is what is punishable in terms of hudud. Like the had is for liwat, which is actual penetration. But there are punishments in the Sharia for just same-sex behavior. That doesn't necessarily include penetration, but that's not at the level of had. That's not the the capital punishment, or in other schools of thought there's lashing for liwat. So of course there are nuances within the fiqh and within the Sharia, and we have to acknowledge all of that. All right, who else wants to challenge? Otherwise, we'll go to another comment. Okay, so I sent my the call-in details to a bunch of people, but maybe they got cold feet or they weren't available. So I want to talk to them. Always available for a good discussion. All right, let me just go to one of the other comments that I saw on Facebook. And inshallah, in the future, we're going to have more of these call-in shows or convince me otherwise. And so this is the first time. We're just trying it out, and I'm working out the kinks. And so I want to make it very productive and beneficial, inshallah. And also, people are fasting, so maybe they're a little bit tired and they don't want to talk. Okay. There was a comment yesterday. Maybe it was deleted. Okay, here it is. It's from a guy named Hamad Hussein. He is an anonymous account, but this guy loves my Facebook page because he often will comment and troll and say something to oppose me. So he has sometimes funny points to make and sometimes not so smart points to make. But I think that it's good to have a substantive engagement with him and others like that. But he had a comment which is interesting. He says, an obvious publicity stunt. When I introduced I'm doing this show, he said it's an obvious publicity stunt. It's funny because sometimes these people will say, oh, Daniel doesn't want to engage with his critics. He's scared. He doesn't want to have a conversation. He wants to ignore people who disagree with him. But then when I do have like a program dedicated to addressing live these arguments and have a conversation, then he calls it a publicity stunt. So you can't win with these people. So then the first thing he says is that disproportionate focus on women and feminism. You seem to bring up numerous examples of women but disregard many issues related to men. For example, your latest obsession with Ilhan Omar. You complain about her stance regarding homosexuality, but there is a Muslim male congressman, Keith Ellison, who has the exact same views and was even a chair on a committee about homosexual rights. And not to mention that the Sultan you saluted reversed his decision, but of course the criticism was for the women by you. And on a grander scale, in every country, it's Muslim males who engage in acts like zina more than Muslim women. Do Muslim males abuse children in Muslim schools, Muslim scholars who have affairs, blah, blah, blah. But your ire is for feminism. Yeah, I get this comment a lot. Daniel, why are you focused on feminism? I'm focused on feminism because it's such an important issue that's causing so much loss of faith and causing so much damage in perspective and understanding of the Muslim community. That's why I focus on it, right? If someone is, suffering from cancer and also has like a bruise on the hand, the doctor is going to focus on the cancer. And then if someone says, why are you focusing on the cancer so much? You're so obsessed with the cancer. What about the bruise? That doesn't make sense. You have to address what is the biggest threat. And that's what I, based on my years of studying feminism, studying liberalism, studying the history of colonialism, studying the history of how the West has been attacking and destroying and subjugating Muslims in the Muslim world, based on that and what I see happening to the Muslim community, happening to my own family, right? All of that is why I focus on feminism, among other threats like liberalism, perennialism, materialism, and so forth. But feminism is a big deal. Feminism is a big problem, and that's why I spend so much time on it. He mentioned Keith Ellison. I've criticized Keith Ellison before, but again, look at the proportionality. There aren't huge fundraisers happening for Keith Ellison. Keith Ellison isn't being invited to masajid and to some of these venues to headline. And when he does, then I do criticize. I have criticized that in the past, right? So this is just cherry picking. But now, in this moment, who is in the spotlight being promoted as this, Salah ad-Din of our time, like this amazing Shiro, Ilhan Omar. We all have to support her. We all have to be united for Ilhan. And it's being shoved down our throats. Literally, you will go to the khutbah, you'll go to Salatul Jum'ah, and the Imam is talking about this. The Khatib is mentioning Ilhan and supporting her and promoting her. Okay? At the masjid. Right? This person who is constantly, this politician who's constantly promoting LGBT, who's constantly promoting, all of these wrong ideas, just introduced legislation sanctioning a country, a Muslim country, for its implementation of the Sharia. She makes mockery of religion on her social media feed. She insults the prophets, the Anbiya. She cracks jokes about Isa alayhi salam. If you want to see evidence of this, go on MuslimSkeptic.com. See everything that I've posted on this. That person is being promoted in our communities at religious venues. So this is religious justification or legitimization. This is a big problem. Of course I'm going to talk about it. Of course I'm going to bring it up. Of course I'm going to focus on it. It's a danger. It's a big threat. It's a big threat. So if you don't see that threat, okay, then I understand why you think it's an overreaction. If you're kind of living on a different planet, or you're under a rock, or you're just not knowledgeable enough to recognize what is happening in the loss of faith and these kinds of dynamics, okay, that's your opinion, that's fine. But don't say that, I just have some obsession with one particular person. No, I'm reacting to what others are shoving down our throats and saying, enough is enough. Enough is enough. I am sick of it. Okay? And anyone else who is going to promote Ilhan Omar and is going to put her on this pedestal and is going to invite her is going to be blasted by me and inshallah many others. You all listening, you have to realize what this person is doing. Okay? This bill that she just introduced last week calls the Sharia, okay, draconian, barbaric. And she's not even talking just about LGBT. She talks about like cutting the hand for theft. Okay, which is again a nuanced topic, but this is straight from the Quran. Our Creator, Allah, has mandated this had, this punishment in the penal code of Islamic law. Okay, and yeah, there's a discussion on where it can be implemented, how it's implemented, etc., etc. Those nuances are there, but she is blatantly saying that no, this is, fi nafsihi, like in and of itself, draconian, barbaric. This is a statement of kufr. This is clear kufr. So if you are going to promote Ilhan Omar, you're going to talk about her in your khutbah, you are going to invite her to speak at the masjid, at your fundraiser, and so forth. Okay, prepare to get blasted. Okay, prepare to have your knowledge of Islam questioned, that you don't recognize this clear kufr. Okay, prepare to be called an opportunist, that you are using the Muslim community, okay, and taking advantage of the Muslim community by promoting this person who has expressed clearly in black and white, her opposition to the Quran. Okay, so if you want to walk that line and you want to start ignoring these things, okay, we're going to come after you. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. All right. So then this same brother, Hamad, I assume he's Muslim, he says, misleading stats. You've mentioned stats like women and men are equally violent and that single women kill their children more than single men and others. Yeah, single women do kill. They commit infanticide more than men. Women will abuse children. Child abuse is more so done at the hands of women, mothers, than it is men. I mean, these are facts. And so he says this is not the whole story. Okay? There are degrees of violence, and when it comes to murder or theft or school shootings or even violence against Muslims, it's overwhelmingly males committing them. Yeah, I nowhere did I ever claim that women commit more murders than men, or women commit more school shootings than men. I never claimed such a thing. That's because it's false. Men do commit more crimes like that. Men are involved in more violent crimes, of course. So what? That's not what my claims about violence are. I claim that, and this is a fact, that when it comes to partner violence and domestic abuse, women and men are very close in terms of the rates of domestic abuse, violent domestic abuse. And there's all kinds of research that justifies that. There's over 200 research papers that justify that and explain that. And so let me share that with you. Okay, so here is an article that is interesting from USA Today. A rape epidemic by women? Question mark, by women. So a new CDC, Center for Disease Control, report reveals troubling equality when it comes to sexual assault rates. Right? So this article is explaining how many of the cases of rape, the way that they've defined rape is such that you have almost equality between the male and the female victims of rape, according to the definition of rape. So much so that they call it a rape epidemic. Okay? So this is one example from a mainstream news source, USA Today. You can go see that. Another article, The surprising truth about women and violence. Go read this. Okay, this is a soccer player who was arrested because she was, committing domestic violence, basically. And so then this article links to research that shows that women are involved at an almost equal rate in domestic violence, intimate partner violence, as men are. They're very often the aggressor. And so the article links to this, references examining assaults by women on their spouses or male partners. And then this is the executive summary. This bibliography examines 286 scholarly investigations, 221 empirical studies, and 65 reviews and or analyses which demonstrate that women are as physically aggressive or more aggressive than men in their relationships with their spouses or male partners. The aggregate sample size in the reviewed studies exceeds 371,000. Okay, so look at all of these articles that make this point, right? 286. So this is what the research shows. And yes, it's true that men are physically stronger than women, and men have more aggressiveness due to testosterone than women. No doubt about it. But even despite that, there is still a very high rate and a comparable rate, almost parity, almost equality, between men as aggressors versus women as aggressors in the domestic sphere. And that's not even counting psychological abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse. If you factor in those things, then abuse from women is greater than abuse from men, right? And I already mentioned child abuse as well. Why are these stats important? These are stats that are taboo, that are not discussed. Why? Because of feminism. Why? Because feminism wants to portray this idea of patriarchy, that there's this oppressive system that is holding down women, that men are taking advantage of and subjugating women for their own benefit. That's the entire feminist thesis. And to justify that, you have to have certain stats and certain kinds of narratives to justify such a grand sweeping claim about this patriarchy, this oppressive system. And a big key part of that narrative is to say that, well, look at domestic violence. Look at how many women are being battered in the household by their spouse or their partner. But it turns out that that key evidence used to justify the patriarchal thesis is not accurate. And when you actually look at the data and you look at the research, it shows that no, in fact, there is a parity. And there's just as many women who are abusing, whether physically, emotionally, or psychologically, men as there are men doing to women. So the entire patriarchal thesis collapses when you actually have a sober, objective look at the history and the statistics and the studies that are published in peer-reviewed journals on this topic. So this is why I'm using these stats and why I talk about the stats. It's not because I'm a quote-unquote men's rights activist. I think men's rights in the sense of we want to have men's rights in the same way that we have women's rights, blah, blah, blah. I think that's a very superficial movement. I think that men's rights movement doesn't really recognize some of the larger harms of modernity and some of the deeper critiques of the destruction of marriage, the destruction of family, the destruction of community that modernity reeks on humanity. So I'm not a men's rights activist, but I do think that it's important to point out these stats because it undermines the patriarchal thesis and therefore undermines feminism, which is a poison, a toxic ideology that has corrupted so many people, Muslims and non-Muslims, that I am striving, as always, to undermine and attack and critique. And one clarification about patriarchy as well is that patriarchy, in the sense of men having authority over women and men being in charge in society, men being the leaders, men having that kind of role and position, that sense of patriarchy is Islamic, right? Because Allah says so in the Quran, and the Prophet ﷺ operationalized that in his life. And throughout Islamic history, all of the fuqaha, all of the scholars are agreed on this concept that men are authorities over women. And this shows itself in the fiqh, and it shows itself in many different places. But does that mean that men are oppressors of women? That men are subjugating women? No. That aspect of patriarchy is a myth, and I've analyzed it and deconstructed it many times, numerous times. And so maybe one day we'll have a Muslim Skeptic Live just dedicated to that question. But this is something that you can see on muslimskeptic.com and read about. There's no basis or justification for that view. And the stats on domestic violence is an example. You look at the stats and it proves that there's parity. There's actually equality between men as abusers versus women as abusers, as we would expect, okay? Because why would you think that men are inherently more evil or men are more inclined to be unjust than women? I mean, isn't that sexist to think that men are inherently more willing to subjugate and abuse and be violent than women against their partners? Okay, so let's see if there's anyone else waiting to call in. Come on, guys. Now's your chance. Now's your chance to tell me what I'm getting so wrong. Okay, someone wants to call in. If you want to call in, by the way, let's open up a little bit. If you want to call in, message me on Facebook. Send me a message on Facebook, and I'll forward you the call-in details. And then also put a note on what you want to talk about. Include a couple of sentences explaining what you want to talk about, because I don't want just spam. Right. Let's see. Someone is saying feminism is a virus that is hurting our mindset on every level. Absolutely agree with that. Yeah. Oh, and someone else is saying about Keith Ellison that he's retired from Congress. Yeah, his stint in Congress is over, and also he's not being promoted by the Muslim community as much as figures like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. When Keith Ellison was in Congress, many Muslim organizations weren't promoting him actually. And were opposed to him because they saw that he was making all kinds of sacrifices on the Israel issue and Zionism in general, and so they kind of cut off ties with him. So he didn't really have that much influence on the mainstream Muslim community as Ilhan Omar is having. Also internationally, right? Because Keith Ellison, I'd be surprised if people overseas in places like the subcontinent or Malaysia, other places, Muslim countries, if they're aware of who Keith Ellison even is. But Ilhan Omar, widely known and unfortunately widely celebrated, because in some places they think, oh wow, there's a Muslim woman wearing hijab or a scarf. I mean, it's not real hijab that she's wearing. And she's in Congress. Wow, that's amazing. And they get very excited without necessarily knowing what it is that she's promoting and what it is that she's saying. So there's a very desperate need to make these clarifications about who she is, what she endorses, what she says. And that's, again, why I focus on or write very often about Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. Rashida, my Allah, is a she Tlaib. Ilhan, transgender dance party Omar. Right? This is how we should refer to them, by what they do and what they promote. Okay, let's see if anyone messaged. Okay. By the way, only call in if you have something that you disagree with me about, that you have, read from me or heard me say, and you disagree, and you want to convince me otherwise, right? So this is not just general call in to give your opinions on XYZ. Okay, here. Someone's gonna call in. 1 second. I'm surprised, a lot of people complain about me and will try to critique me in comments, but now's your chance to actually talk in front of people live, so it's a perfect opportunity to critique. I want to hear what you have to say, so message and comment. So here's a comment from Claudia. She says, can you explain a bit better your position on masajid that don't allow women? I've read an article about this, masajid that, because this is a well-respected, established position that some schools of thought take, particularly the Hanafi school. And they basically, they don't, the position is that women leaving the home for attending prayers in the masjid is not a valid reason to leave the home, and therefore the husband can prevent that, and masajid do not have to have spaces accommodating women in that sense. So I think this is a valid position that should be respected. Is a position that I take personally. Not necessarily, because my wife, as I've mentioned before, I do allow her to go to study or take classes, durus, at the masjid. The thing is that those classes could be offered anywhere. They don't have to be at the masjid. But in our case, where we live in our particular location, that's where some of these classes are. And she also teaches sometimes. And sometimes when she's teaching, it can be in the musalla. She's done that in the past. So that's not necessarily the position that I take. But do I think that we have to enforce these different masajid, particularly in the UK, some in the US as well, that don't have spaces for women? Do we have to force them to make space for women? No. Why should we do that? I don't think that is correct. And I've explained that in the articles I've published on MuslimSkeptic.com. The thing is that what people disregard when they want to say that, well, there's difference of opinion on the issue of women attending the masjid, what they disregard is that all of the other schools of thought and even the other opinions within and other positions within the Hanafi school of thought have various conditions for women attending the masjid. Okay? They have various conditions for that. So women who are wearing perfume, the Prophet ﷺ himself in a Sahih Hadith said that women who are wearing perfume should not be allowed to go to the masjid. And then the scholars elaborated on this, saying that even dressing attractively or not wearing correct hijab, or even young women shouldn't be allowed to attend the masjid. I mean, all of these different conditions that prevent women or certain segments of women from attending the masjid. And so if we want to be accurate in representing the Islamic tradition on this issue, then where's the discussion of those conditions, those shurut? There isn't a conversation on that because all of those things contradict the feminist narrative. Okay? What the feminist narrative is that women should have exactly equal right to attend the masjid as men do. And women should have exactly the same kind of space as men do. But this is not supported by anyone in the Islamic tradition. There's no ikhtilaf on this issue, right? No scholar says or has said that women have equal access or should have equal access to the masjid in the same capacity that men do. Even on the issue of menstruation, right? Because the menstruating woman is not going to pray at the masjid, right? She can't pray in the masjid. And there's no ikhtilaf on that. And so she's prevented from that. And if she were to do that, that is something that is impermissible and she'd be liable for that kind of behavior. So no scholar, no school of thought ever has said that there's equal capacity for men and women to attend the masjid. Because there are all these conditions that women have to abide by in order to do so in all the schools of thought. And so I posted on this. I put all these details if you want to go research it. There's a great article that I linked to as well in my latest post on women attending the masjid by Mufti Zamil al-Rahman. So check it out, read that, and it's not like if you consider this misogyny, then okay, all of the Islamic tradition is misogynistic then, right? That's the point that I'm trying to make. And so Claudia follows up and she says, what about the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says, do not keep your women from going to the masajid? So there are a lot of details about this hadith, right? Because you have even Sahaba who know the hadith better than we do. They're more pious than we are. They're more pious than any of the people who follow them. They're the Sahaba. And so you have Aisha and you have Umar who said that due to our circumstances now and the condition of women now and how women are behaving, then we can prevent women from attending the masjid. This is the Sahaba who are saying this. So are you going to say that these Sahaba are wrong? Are you going to say that Aisha radiallahu anha, our mother, is mistaken? Or that she doesn't really understand the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? That she doesn't really understand the sunnah? No, obviously not. You know? Wa na'udhu billah, from that kind of mentality. So even Sahaba are preventing women from going to the masjid. And this is well documented. And if we look at the condition of how, like, the women attending the masjid in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because this is the kind of argument that some people will make. They'll say that, well, look at all of the Sahaba who were the Sahabiyat who were attending the masjid. Isn't that proof that this is something that is allowed? And so the scholars did use that as proof. The ulama in fiqh, they did use that as proof. But that's why they put conditions, because if you look at what the Sahabiyat were doing and their behavior when attending the masjid, it's night and day different than what we see today, than what we see in our times, and for arguably a lot of Muslim history, because even the Sahaba, even Aisha, even Umar, were saying that because of the condition of women in our time, in the sense that they are acting immodestly, we have to prevent women from going to the masjid. So that was in the time of the Sahaba. Imagine now. Now, some of the women going to the masjid are dressed up as if they're going to like a dance party, right? Completely inappropriately dressed. In some of these masajid that do allow women, I can't even walk through the parking lot without there being perfume. Like I smell all kinds of perfume in the open air parking lot. Imagine if they're inside the building, right? So these are women who are not abiding by the conditions that are set in the fiqh. They are not modest. They're not acting modestly. And so there is a justification for preventing women from going to some of these masajid. And the point that I was going to make also is that if you look at what the Sahabiyat were doing and how they went to the masjid, yes, they went to the masjid, but how were they dressed? There are reports, okay? Don't cite one hadith by itself. Okay, don't cite one hadith. Look at all of the different narrations, all of the different contexts. The Sahabiyat were dressed in all black, right? This is the narrations. No coloring, no coloration in their clothes when they're going to the masjid. They would cover their face. They would draw their khimar over their faces, over the entirety of their face, such that even just one eye showing so they know where they're going. And they were only going to the masjid at night for the night prayers. This is an important detail that is left out, because when you're living in a time without electricity, without lighting, then it's going to be very dark. It's going to be very dark. You're not going to be able to see. So some of these people saying, "Oh, well, there's no barrier in the masjid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam." Okay, yeah, there's no barrier, but did they have like lighting? When are the Sahabiyat coming to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's masjid? They're coming for the night prayers, Isha. They're coming for Fajr. They're coming when there's no light. So you can't see women, right? You can't even see them. And so they're covered from head to toe. Their faces are covered. They're not wearing perfume. They're not beautifying themselves. They're not mixing. They're coming from a separate entrance, okay? They're not mixing with men. It's pitch black. They're not being recognized in any capacity. Okay, if women want to abide by this and they want to follow this, yeah, then okay. I'm sure that some of these masajid will go back to the drawing board and maybe think that, okay, maybe there is a need here for women to attend the masjid if they're going to be dressed and acting in this kind of modest way. Unfortunately, that's not the reality. So people who want to talk about hadith and they want to talk about the sahabiyat and they want to talk about this kind of precedence, okay, bring the whole picture, bring the whole context, right? Don't cherry pick and then lecture us on what is or isn't the sunnah, right? So that's why I say that. Yeah, and the idea, in the article that I wrote about this topic, I talked about Muslim as community center. And so some objections that people have is that, well, the masjid is the only place where we can get religious knowledge. The masjid is the only place where we can have a connection to deen. And therefore, it's necessary for women to go to the masjid. If you cut that off, then these women are not going to have any connection to deen and to religious learning. I find that hard to believe. I think that, yes, in some places, like I mentioned my own example, the durus are only happening in the masjid and my wife will actually go, or so on and so forth. But you have online, you have live streaming, you have so much opportunities to gain religious knowledge through online. You can have meetings, but do the meetings at a private residence, just not the masjid, right? Why does it have to be in the masjid? That no one has explained to me why. That's a necessity. So people need to argue like, I think, in a better way, in a more complete way. And so I didn't mean to like I'm not like trying to attack this sister who's asking the question, Claudia. I'm not trying to attack you. So I apologize if I got a little bit emotional talking about this subject. And I'm not attributing those arguments to you. So, I mean, mashallah, you're modest and you're attending the masjid for the sake of Allah, and you're abiding by those conditions that the fuqaha have mentioned, and you're not mixing with men. You're doing all of that. So, mashallah, may Allah reward you for your intention and for what you're doing. So, may Allah bless all the sisters who are being modest and are maintaining the hudud of Allah. And so, there's opinions. Obviously, the majority of scholars say that women can be allowed to attend the masajid. So I just want to be very, very clear on that. I just get frustrated with some of the other kinds of arguments that are made on this topic. So that's why I was responding like that. Okay, let's see. Anyone else want to call in? Okay, so here we have a caller. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
How are you? Who is this? Can you please say your name?
It's Abdullah.
Abdullah. Okay, great, Abdullah. So please state your comments.
Sure. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So for about a year or two, maybe, year and a half, so I've been reading your comments regularly. I believe I've benefited a lot, and that I'm sure there are people that are benefiting. I guess the primary thing would be, and I'm sure you get it all the time, it's Abdullah Najjar.
Oh, you might want to turn off or mute your TV or video broadcast because there's a delay. So just use Skype for my voice.
I was like, yeah, what's going on? You asked the same question twice. All right, my bad.
Yeah.
I'll start again. Bismillah. So I'm sure you get this all the time, but my primary contention would be tone, approach, strategy, whatever word you want to use, but it's not necessarily the content, right? So I would say...
Hello?
Yeah. I would say that the necessity, the value of studying all the different philosophies of our times, all the different lifestyles and so on, I think it should be obvious. It's great. It's part of da'wah, right? We want to not only explain La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, but also all the other, possibly competing ideologies and so on. But the contention would be that in this time and place, from my observations and my experiences, I would say it's best to use that knowledge to bring people towards Islam, right? Sheikh Jafar Idris has a beautiful article called Islam, the Religion of Natural Bridges, right? So you learn about Buddhism and Hinduism, for example, and then you talk about Khushu' and Salah, just an example. Logic and science, you talk to atheists. You talk about Jesus and Mary to Christians. It's a religion of natural bridges. You're trying to pull people towards you rather than push people away from you. And maybe at different times and places, different approaches would work. But I feel like today, the time of confusion, disunity, lack of Islamic knowledge, misunderstandings, attacks against Muslims, mostly ignorance from inside and outside, from everywhere, all directions. I don't want us to fall into the clash of civilizations and we don't want to be that trope of that Muslim who's, has an issue with everybody and can't get along with anybody and disagrees with everyone, hateful, intolerant, and violent, which me and you both know that Islam does not make us hateful, intolerant, and violent. So that's where I come from.
So, okay, let me just ask a follow-up question. So what would you say if someone comes to you and says, well, Muslims need to accept same-sex marriage and they need to celebrate it? What would you say to that?
Sure. So I read the article by Yaqeen Institute, and it was mentioned on this video, and I'm sure you get this a lot, but I thought that did a great job. I heard Dr. Jonathan Brown's and Shahid al-Masri's response, and I would share that article. And I've done that in the past. I get asked this. So one of the things I do is I'm a youth director in the community. I've spoken at schools and youth groups.
So that article, I don't know what in those articles you're referring to, but someone would say, well, this is not a celebration of same-sex behavior and same-sex marriage. This is not a moral acceptance. Well, let me finish. This is not a... Okay, if you can't... You have to let me finish talking to stay on the line. So they would say that, well, this is something that is not accepting the morality of same-sex behavior, and this is intolerant, because if you can't accept the same-sex lifestyle, that is similar to not being able to accept black people or different races, Chinese people or whatever. So this is intolerant, it's bigotry, and if you don't celebrate same-sex behavior, then you're an extremist, and our society has a right to sanction you. So what is the very kind, gentle way to respond to that?
Sure. In this particular point, I would agree with you in pointing out to people the double standards of how people might be in the name of tolerance, intolerant towards Muslims and Orthodox Islam. So I'm not trying to say that the approach is the hippie, liberal, progressive approach.
Well, they'd say,
I like to explain that we believe in it. We have a tradition. We have the Quran. We have the Sunnah.
Well, what they'd say to that is that you're. Do you think that it's okay for society to be intolerant to the KKK? Do you think it's okay for society to be intolerant to Nazis? Because that's what Muslims are like when they reject same-sex behavior and same-sex morality. They're akin to those who are in the KKK or who are neo-Nazis. So we have to be intolerant towards those groups, right? Do you agree with that? So then, do you agree with Muslims being sanctioned?
And then I'll go into a discussion maybe of objective morality. I would say we're not tolerant of, or we believe that some things are right, some things are wrong. We're not tolerant of every idea and every belief. We don't believe that all ideas are valid, and yes, that's not politically correct. The notions of our time of just be yourself and just do it and whatever makes you happy and just live your life in YOLO. I share this with the kids like almost every day. Like this isn't the best advice, even if it is sincere. People are telling you to be happy, but happiness is from obeying Allah and His Messenger and the whole thing. And obviously all this, so I'm not here to preach or anything. But you can go into all this in a way that's it's soft and gentle and trying to pull people towards you rather than push people away.
Why is it soft and gentle? That's the thing. You're not being soft and gentle if you're saying that this is the objective truth and that what you're following is not true. That people find that very offensive. They find that very damaging. They don't think that that's building bridges. You're just asserting that you have the truth and that others don't, right?
I don't know. I think that the same content, like the same message, it could be shared in multiple ways. I think it can be done in a way that people understand that you love and care about them. One of the biggest criticisms I've heard of you from other people, and I try to defend you because I want to defend anyone behind their back. But it was just a couple of days ago, someone was saying, I read their stuff and I agree this is truth and so on. But their approach, I can't. It's too much. I'm like, I wanted to hear from them. And basically, they said people need to understand when 99% of America are non-Muslim and the majority of people around the world are non-Muslim, majority of Muslims don't understand the Deen. People need to understand when you talk to them about this stuff, when you're taking the role of a da'i, that people that you love them and that you want what's best for them, that you care about them. Sometimes your tone doesn't show that, even though I'm sure it is true. I'm sure that you deep down, the only reason you're sacrificing a lot in terms of your career, in terms of your time, in terms of your energy, in terms of your intelligence. You could have been like a professor at Harvard, for example, made a lot of money and people loved you. If you just said that, whatever modernity and liberalism, secularism, and we need to be progressive Muslims in our traditions, we all know this, right? I'm saying that in your tone, it should come out, people should understand that you're trying to pull them closer, that you love them, you want what's good for them. And it doesn't always come off like that in your tone. So it's not really about the content or the message. I agree with you that we have to have orthodox positions and people might hate you for that.
Right.
I want people to hate you.
So let me respond to what you said already.
While you're hating on them, if that makes sense.
So the thing is that one distinction to make is that not everything is dawah. Not everything is in a dawah context of calling people to Islam. Not everything that is written publicly or on social media is about calling people and attracting them to Islam and doing tabligh, basically. So a lot of what I write about is directed to people who are already Muslim, Muslims who consider themselves practicing and devout. And so in that context, a variety of tones can be used, and including sometimes more harsh, sometimes more aggressive, sometimes more forthright, more black and white, and so on and so forth. That can have a benefit. And I get comments all the time and messages all the time that, Daniel, your approach really appeals to my personality and appeals to my mindset. And I had the wrong ideas about certain things, but you woke me up because of the kind of tone that you use. So we have to, unfortunately, I think that what political correctness dictates in this society is that you can be outspoken, you can be aggressive, you can be very forthright and in your face about certain topics. Like if you want to denounce Donald Trump and you want to call him a mother effer and you want to call him a fascist, if you want to denounce ICE, right, the immigration, whatever, bad organization, you want to criticize these different things, yeah, you can be aggressive, you can use foul language, you can be this and that. That's seen as justified. But if you want to talk about religion, and specifically parts of religion that are not aligned with what is politically correct, then you have to be quiet, you have to be very deferential, you have to be very accommodating, you have to be very this and that. That's the kind of context in which we live in, and I don't want to be constrained by that, because what it does is it shows that religion is lower on the level of priorities. Religion is lower on the epistemic level. Religion is less important than liberal morality and political correctness and so forth. And so I actively am trying to subvert this, because no, we should be the most passionate about violations against Allah. We should be most upset about violations of the Sharia and what Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam have said. And recently, I shared a video or a series of lectures from a scholar, Sheikh Salek, He is one of the senior scholars in North America, mashallah, very knowledgeable, one of the senior students of Murabit al-Hajj, extremely knowledgeable sheikh. And he was speaking very aggressively and even insulting a certain feminist who had given a lecture on, the Prophet ﷺ, and was basically lying and insulting the Prophet in different ways, and insulting Aisha radiallahu anha and the Sahaba and so forth. And so he was very aggressive in correcting this, and he was very speaking even in insulting terms. And he used that kind of tone, and that's out of his wisdom, out of his hikmah, that he's addressing this in that way to send a clear message that this is unacceptable, right? And so there's a wisdom there. And then people, when I share this, were commenting that, oh, I don't like this because it's insult, like he uses too many insults and he's too aggressive. And I found that very shocking. The person that the sheikh is addressing is insulting the Prophet ﷺ, demeaning the Prophet ﷺ, attacking the Prophet ﷺ. And you're more concerned about how the sheikh is responding to that? You're more upset about his response than about this lying person, this lying, disgusting person? Makes no sense. So, I can talk days and days about this subject of tone. One of the other points that I make is that, look, again, it's not all about da'wah. You have many different problems in society around us. And if those in society and within the Muslim community as well, increasingly encroaching on the community, and those problems are dire, they're mortal problems that are so dangerous. And if there is a mortal problem and you whisper the problem, or you say a very gentle tone, or you use a kind of wishy-washy or accommodating tone, such as, oh well, this might not be the best, right? Muslims accepting feminism, it might not be the best course of option, in my opinion, right? You can use a very accommodating diplomatic language, but are you really getting the message across? Are you really communicating the danger that exists? If you don't understand the danger, okay, that's a separate issue. If you don't understand that this is a problem, then you need to educate yourself. But when you do understand the danger, that there's a cancer, right? Then you're going to speak very aggressively. Imagine like someone who's smoking, right? They have a smoking habit. Are you going to go up to them and say that, oh, well, maybe it's not the best idea, perhaps you should reconsider? Yeah, you might say that in a personal context, but then they don't listen. They say, oh, okay, well, I'll think about it. But they're dying. They're smoking, and they're going to be more liable to have cancer. They're more liable to suffer from all kinds of problems health-wise. No, you're going to have a very clear stance, like this is going to kill you. This is going to kill you if you continue smoking. And when you look at the Surgeon General's warning on this pack of cigarettes, it's not mincing any words, right? It's very clear at what the danger is, because it's a real threat. But people who don't necessarily recognize the threat of liberalism, feminism, perennialism, having this kind of insulting attitude towards the Prophet ﷺ, the Sharia, the Sunnah, and so forth, they don't understand the danger, then yeah, they're going to see what I say as being aggressive and harsh or the wrong tone. But the way that I see it is like the Safina, the hadith of the Safina, where the Prophet ﷺ says that those who abide by the hudud of Allah and who follow the guidelines of Islam are like people on the deck of a ark or a ship on the sea. And then the people who don't abide by the Sharia, they don't abide by the hudud of Allah, are underneath the deck of the ship. And so for getting water, the people below deck have to go to the top deck to get water to drink. And so one day the people below deck decide that, hey, we can access water much more easily if we just dig a hole in the bottom of the ship. We can access water directly. And so then the people at the top of the deck have a responsibility to prevent the people below from digging a hole in the bottom of the ship, because otherwise everyone is going to sink. This is an existential threat, right? And so when the scholars comment on this hadith, they say that given it's an existential threat, you have to do what's necessary. So if you have to hit the person on the hand to prevent them from digging, and damaging the boat and breaching the hull, then that is allowed. That is justified, shar'an, according to the Sharia. And so that's the same kind of thing. We are all on this boat together, and sometimes a harsh tone is needed to prevent people from digging a hole in the bottom of the ship and destroying us all. If we have that sense of urgency, then this kind of tone is justified. So thanks for your comment. Let's go to another. Okay. Yeah, we're running out of time. I just have another half hour, so I'm trying to get through as many as possible. Okay, this brother is not answering. Let's try someone else.
Hello?
Assalamu alaikum, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, how are you doing?
Good, alhamdulillah. So can you please state your name?
Daniel, it's going to be iftar time. Is it okay if I come on another program? I need to go. I wanted to come earlier, but it just
Okay,
schedule was
so
different.
yeah, that's fine. We'll have more call-in shows, inshallah. So enjoy your iftar. May Allah accept. Okay.
You look really bright on your side, by the way. I wanted to say that earlier. It's quite dark now, and
Yeah.
farewell, young one. Farewell. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like you have a English accent, so it's probably iftar time for you now. And I'm in Texas, so I have a Texas accent, right?
Yeah. I mean, not accent. I mean, your brightness. It looks really sunny.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
I don't want to
alhamdulillah.
take too much time of your program. Thanks for offering, but another time, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah, another time. Assalamu alaikum.
Bye.
Okay, let's see. Who else? So, Kulthum says, Daniel does not sugarcoat anything and his approach is to the point. We need this. Everything can't be wishy-washy, accommodating tone. Yeah, that's what I think. And I think that when you live in... The thing is that when you live in an intellectual context where religion is seen as backwards or religion is seen as at a lower epistemic level, as science, as liberal values, as liberal secular ideology and epistemology, then you're going to feel the pressure and you're going to adjust your language to in accordance with that kind of order where you have secular liberalism at the top and then religion is at the bottom, and even Islam and traditional Islam is even below that, right? So Muslims, if they're not careful, they can start speaking in ways that betray their commitment to Islam. And an example of how this can work in a very subtle way is you have people, Muslims, who will say things like, well, I think that Islam is the truth in my opinion, and I think it's something good to follow, and everyone is free to do what they want. And so this kind of very wishy-washy, accommodating language betrays Iman. It betrays a commitment to Islam as the truth. Okay, you're speaking in that way because you are taking religion as a kind of opinion. Oh, I am a Muslim, that's my opinion. You're a non-Muslim, that's your opinion, and all opinions are valid. Okay, because when it comes to religion, it's about opinion. When it comes to science, when it comes to human rights regime, when it comes to liberal morality, that's what truth is about, right? People talking about human rights, people talking about immigration, people talking about feminism, they talk in very clear-cut terms. This is right, this is wrong, you're a misogynist, you're Hitler, you're a fascist. right? It's very clear cut and not wishy-washy at all. But if you talk about religion, then you have to be, oh, this is just my personal opinion. Well, why? Okay, why do we have to accept that kind of order? And why do we have to subject ourselves to that kind of language? That's not correct. Okay, because you can say something that is actually wrong, because it's not true that everyone has the right to believe what they want to believe. No, people don't have the right. Okay, they can, right? Just like everyone has the right to, violate traffic laws. Everyone has the right in the sense that you can do it, but is it right? Is it correct? No, you're going to be punished for it. You might get a traffic ticket. You might get arrested. You might even be put in prison for violating traffic laws. So no, you don't have a right to violate traffic laws. In a similar way, you don't have the right to disobey Allah. You don't have a right to disbelieve in Allah. You may, but you're liable for that in the sense that you are liable to be punished by Allah. And Allah has promised that His punishment is severe for those who reject His message and who reject the signs that they can find within themselves and on the horizon and in the world around us. The signs that point to Islam being the truth. Those who reject that, they can reject that. Do they have the right to reject it in the sense that they are justified morally in rejecting it? No, not at all. So we have to speak in the correct way. We have to speak correctly about deen. And we can't just be wishy-washy and accommodating, because in many cases, we even violate our belief and our principles. And this has a very negative impact. Okay. Who else is talking? Or who else is messaging? Where are people? Okay. I already addressed tone enough for one day. So if you want to call in on another issue other than tone, because I just talked about it like for an hour. Let's see. Also, when you call in, make sure to mute your own monitor or laptop, because just listen to the audio on the Skype call. Come on, something juicy. I don't want to talk about tone for the 500th time. Ibn Adam comments, if we define liberalism from a liberal perspective, then liberalism is an ideology. If we define liberalism from an Islamic perspective, liberalism is a religion with its priests, its books, temples, and gods. Yeah, absolutely. We should view liberalism as the state religion that's imposed by force on the entire world. And if you violate the religion of liberalism, then you're going to be punished. And you're going to face sanctions. Your country might be invaded. You're going to be killed. You're going to be have your land taken. This is the kind of justification that the thinkers of liberalism theorized and philosophized, put in their philosophy, basically, that you're justified, the white man is justified in colonizing the Muslim world, China, India, Africa, North and South America, the white man is justified in this because the white man is going to bring civilization and is going to civilize the barbarians. So this is the white man's burden. And so they justified this, and they continue to justify it, and that's why someone like Ilhan Omar is perfectly in the tradition of these white colonizers, because she's imposing sanctions on a small Muslim country because that country is not liberal enough for her liking. This brother is not answering his phone. Okay, what else? Gotta use the full 2.5 hours time that I have. Salam Majid or Majid says, why is your focus always on what's going on in America? How about expand the spectrum and maybe focus on issues related to the UK? I've written several articles on what's happening in the UK, especially with this LGBT education in primary schools. I've commented on it. I've commented on the politicians in the UK. I've commented on Masajid in the UK. So just look at MuslimSkeptic.com, maybe do a search on UK or British or so forth, and then you'll find a lot of articles that I've written over the years focusing on the UK. I think a lot of the things that they do in the UK is correct. MashaAllah, the community in many ways is in a better place than the American Muslim community. And I often praise the UK Muslim community for those things that they're doing right. And unfortunately, certain parts of the American Muslim community are doing wrong. So that's definitely something that I have commented on in the past. Adam Yusufzai says, have you got any references to your saying that domestic violence is parity between men and women? I shared the article. I'll put it in the links after I finish the live broadcast. Or maybe I can just put it in the chat right now. Hold on, let me see. Oh, I closed the window. Hold on. Okay, here it is. I'm putting it in the chat. There you go. This is the Facebook chat. Yeah, definitely read, do your research, and you can see the stats very clear. Okay, Chico Chaco says, what's your thoughts about YQ? I assume you mean Yasser Qadi, saying I stand with Ilhan Omar at the latest conference. I don't know if he said that or not, so if he did say that, I think that's wrong, it's bad, and he should be asked, like, do you support Ilhan Omar when she says that, when she sanctions a Muslim country for following the Sharia, and she calls the Sharia barbaric and draconian? Does Yasser Qadi or any of these people who say I stand with Ilhan Omar say that? If so, okay, make that clear so the rest of the community can act and judge accordingly. Let's see. Okay, I'm going back. Brother Hisham says, Daniel, you should address the issue of cowardice. I'm not sure what that refers to. Khalil, brother Khalil says, Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam. Is it possible for you to start writing in Persian on the topic of feminism? Alhamdulillah, for English speaking, there's plenty of material, and English speakers have come with stuff. However, in other countries, there's a lack of material on feminism. So I can actually read and write in Farsi, but writing is a little bit more difficult, and I don't have as much practice. So it's much more difficult for me to write like a very good high-level essay on feminism, for example, in Farsi. But if someone is willing to translate or work with me on translation, I'd be happy to do that. So just reach out to me and we can talk about it. Okay. What else? Florian says, any book recommendations? You can go to muslimskeptic.com. There's a reading list over there that you can see with all my book recommendations. I don't endorse everything that are in those books, but if you start reading some of them, I think you'll benefit, inshallah. So check out muslimskeptic.com. At the top, there's a reading list tab that you can go and see all of my recommendations. Okay, Assalamu alaikum. I think we have someone on the line now.
Hi, Daniel, did you call earlier?
Hello, can you hear me? Can you state your name?
Hello?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Walaikum assalam, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you state your name?
Yeah, I'm Umar. I called earlier, but I was eating some food at that time, but
Okay.
now is a good time.
Alhamdulillah. Okay. So tell me what you want to talk about.
Oh, I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you a really interesting story. I think it'll resonate with you.
Okay,
I
inshallah.
want to know...
Try to keep it shorter.
Okay, fine. And if you can just share your opinion as well, okay?
Okay.
So this was last year, a couple of years ago actually. Final year of medical school. Second last actually. I was in a lecture, small group lecture. The topic was HIV and AIDS, and then the lecturer, he made a point halfway through. He's talking about the management of this condition, and he was saying, it's 10 times more common in gay and homosexual people than straight people. And then he said a point. Halfway through, he made a point about the morality. He said it's also present in some animal species, so we should also be accepting of it. And then he carried on his lecture, and then he finished. And at that point, I was thinking, okay, I can make a comment. I have an interesting reply. Let's see what he says. But then he didn't. He moved on. And I thought, okay, I'll stay silent. Then he asked at the end of the lecture, does anyone have any questions? No one put up their hand. So I said, okay, anyone have any questions? I insist, if anyone has any questions, just ask it now. So I thought, okay, fine, let's ask him a question. Are you listening, by the way? Is anyone there?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So then I put up my hand. I said, Professor, you said earlier in your lecture that we should accept this behavior because animal species is involved in animal species. They also engage in it. But then I said animal species, they also engage in cannibalism. So to what extent should we use animals as models for human behavior? Then he got a bit flustered. He didn't like the question. He talked about Freudian sliding scale of homosexuality. He didn't really address the question. And he was a bit flustered, but I thought, fine, that's it. I don't want to push him too much. I said what I had to say. Let's move on. So then I carry on normal day-to-day activities, doing what one does, going to university, lecture, blah, blah, blah. Then I get an email. Two weeks later from this, from the university, deputy head of the medical school. Hey, we'd like to have a meeting with you. I said, okay, why? I replied back politely, why, what happened? Is there any particular issue you would like to discuss? They said, no, we'd prefer not to tell you, we'd discuss it in person. And then, along those lines, not exactly word for word, then I had a meeting with them, Daniel, and then this lecturer tried to spin what I said. He's tried to claim that I said this was a perversion, and then make it into a big deal, and like this future doctor, blah blah blah. Should he be fit for all this? And then they started questioning me. What's your religion? How many times do you pray? How does your religion affect your medical views? All these questions, they're personal probing questions, just because I asked one question to the lecturer. To what extent should we use animals for models of human behavior? So wait, firstly, what's your opinion?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a great example of the liberal religion, that you expressed doubt in the basis of that doctrine, of their LGBT doctrine, and so you are considered a heretic, and so you need to be re-educated so that you understand that what you said is heresy, and that you will be punished and you will be damned if you continue to think in this kind of way, just by merely asking a question. So look at how dogmatic they are, except their dogmatism is based on their own whims and desires and their own cultural programming. But yeah, it's a very very typical case. It's very common. I've heard many other examples like this where, and this, your question was very respectful. It's very simple. It's very logical. You weren't aggressive. You weren't using bad language. You just asked a simple question, but it is experienced by them as an attack. It is experienced by them as you being rude to such an extent that they have to call you and they have to put you in this meeting with the professor to basically put you on trial and to subject you to that kind of talking down, dressing down. So this shows you their intolerance based on their religion. And no matter how respectful you are, they don't tolerate it. They're not going to accept it.
Yeah, I think the word trial is a good word. Trial is the perfect word for this scenario. And I passed the trial. I mean, I said, as a doctor, you see many kind of patients, all backgrounds, all nationalities. But you're still going to treat them. Your job in this interaction is to give them the medical help they need. And I said some really polite words, and they said, fine, yeah, we don't think any further action needs to be taken. And then they drew a line under it, and then they wrote a report, someone scribing the meeting, and they sent a message back to me. And the most interesting thing, Daniel, is, okay, this incident happened, but then when I explain this incident to other Muslims, this is the part that concerns me, then they tell me, hey, you should have said it in a different way, you didn't need to say it, you didn't need to ruffle any feathers, you could have just stayed quiet. And Daniel, that's the part that annoys me.
Yeah, how much more politely you could have said it. It's unbelievable.
I couldn't. So then, yeah, that was the end of the story, really. I just thought it would be something that worth sharing, just to show how there is like a agenda. Though it pervades universities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate sharing that story.
Okay, sure. Thanks a lot for the chance to talk today.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you telling us this story, and it's unbelievable, like the way that they bully and they pressure people, and really this conversation about tone. In many cases, not all, right? When people say, "Oh, you have to have a better tone," or "You're too aggressive," what they really mean is you should shut up, or you shouldn't talk like this, or you shouldn't think like this. Not everyone, okay? Not everyone who has an objection on tone is like this, but in many cases, that's what they mean. And when people say that, oh, well, Daniel or whoever, you should have a better tone, okay, well then show me an example. Okay? This is what I always say to my critics. You think that I'm not approaching it in the right way? You think my tone is the problem, but you agree with the content of what I'm saying, but you don't agree with the tone. Okay, show me an example of the proper tone that's used and is also getting across the same points, is also getting across the same arguments. And I'm waiting really to see examples of that. Unfortunately, they're not on offer when these people are offering this kind of criticism. So thank you again for that story. We have to kind of wrap up now. We just have 5 minutes. Any last comments? And also, like, when I say we should be able to talk forthrightly, we should be, sometimes we're going to be aggressive in what we say. Everything is with hikmah, right? Just because you are speaking in an aggressive way does not mean that that is not in accordance with hikmah, not in accordance with adab, not in accordance with the sunnah. No. Sometimes the right way to speak is in an aggressive way, in a forthright way, even in an insulting way. And again, I refer you to the durus, the lessons of Sheikh Saleh, and look at the language that he uses. And he addresses this in the talk itself. He says that dhulm, what injustice means, is putting something in a place that it doesn't belong, right? That's what injustice is. That's the usul of what injustice means, dhulm means. And if you are going to address a crime in a soft way and speak about it in a soft way, that in a certain situation, that is not just. You're in fact committing injustice, and you're violating adab. You're violating the correct approach by being soft on a crime when you should have been harsh, when you should have been clear-cut, when you should have been even insulting and dismissive and belittling of the crime. So Sheikh Saleh explicates this and elaborates this in a very eloquent, beautiful way. And if you don't understand Arabic, there's a translation in that lesson where he speaks about this and explains that adab and hikmah and the sunnah is not to be meek and quiet. This is a Christian understanding, that we're always turning the other cheek and that we have to speak in muted tones with utmost respect all the time. No, that is not actually part of the sunnah. That is not part of what the scholars have actually explicated and demonstrated in their own teachings and in their own writings. So look at Sheikh Saleh, look at other ulama who have written in the past and see how they describe kufr and how they describe nifaq and how they describe the zanadiqa, the heretics, the mulhidun. See how they talk about these subjects. And you'll be shocked. If you think that the way that I talk is too aggressive, you should read that material. You should listen to Sheikh Saleh. You should see how he addresses these topics. And other teachers as well. Okay, they're not as well known because they're not in the West, amongst the Western audience, but they are there. The most senior scholars, the way they address certain topics, you'd be shocked. Unfortunately, people think that what they see on social media amongst more liberal inclined social justice activists, imams, and scholars, they think that, that's what scholarship means, or that's what the approach that we should always take. No, you have a very limited understanding of what scholarship is, and you have a very constrained idea of who the ulama are. The ulama who are speaking in the West and the East, look at how they address these issues, and then you will have a better understanding of what is the correct tone to use, what is hikmah, what is adab, and so forth. Okay, jazakumullahu khaira for everyone's commentary, calling in. Like I mentioned, we're going to do these kinds of shows more often, inshallah. Hopefully you benefited. If you did, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can follow on Facebook and so forth. And share. And inshallah, next week, I'm not sure if there's going to be Muslim Skeptic Live, but I'll announce it if there is. So if there is, I'll see you next week, inshallah. If not, the week after that. And I think after that is going to be close to Eid or after Eid, actually, depending on when the moon is sighted. Okay, so barakallahu feekum and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.